whiteboard out. Share my screen. So welcome to today's topic is prototyping. A quick maybe flashback of our journey for Philip. I don't know if you were able to join our previous sessions.
No.
What we're doing here, I'm sorry?
No, I wasn't, unfortunately.
Okay, fine. So no problem. Just give you a quick recap. We're just going through the different sessions of the sprints, especially looking at how it can be done more remotely, more virtually, and what are different ways of approaching it. Because there is the classic version that the book advocates and says, you know, these are the ways in which you can do the multiple activities. But from my experience, I feel it can be organized differently sometimes. Sometimes you can use different exercises. Sometimes you can do it completely offline and you don't have to actually be remotely together also. So we started with, so mapping, we went into like, so we even took like a sample sort of problem statement of citizen trying to get vaccinated and not being able to do that because the process is kind of frustrating. You don't get the right information, you don't get the right websites, etc. So we did some long-term goals. We looked at what could be some short-term goals. These are the long-term goals. In 2 years, we want to be sure every citizen is vaccinated. Then we quickly saw how the lightning demos worked. Then we moved into quickly making a map out of it, trying to organize the whole thing, cluster it. The how might we, sorry, we got the how might we's together and finally made a map out of it. And then we also decided to try focusing on, say, vaccine opponents, or how can we sort of get some awareness on build trust with them. That was sort of the how might we started working on very roughly. Then in the previous session, we looked at sketching. So sketching is basically the 4-step process. You start with getting some notes, then ideas, and you make the crazy 8, and finally the solution sketch. And we actually tried out the crazy 8s a little bit to see what you get out of it. And of course, the next step would be to create a solution sketch. So this is already the sprint going into the solution space and trying to see what is the right solution sketch that fits the sprint question that you started with. What are the elements that really work? And how can this be turned into a really good storyboard? So that was also the decision-making process that we looked at. So for example, one part of the decision-making process was everyone in the sprint team sort of providing a heat map of what are the elements that they liked in the sketch. And after that, if needed, the decider had a super vote. So the decider could be anyone who sort of makes the ultimate solution about which solution to test and prototype, so prototype and test, whichever way. And this person then also got to give their vote. And finally, it got turned into a storyboard. And we also looked at a collaborative way of creating the storyboard, because it can be a time-consuming process, whether you do it, you know, by hand, or also when you're doing it together with other people. So the hack here is for each sprint participant to do an individual storyboard, and then you put it all together and see what the bigger, larger storyboard looks like. And even that can be iterated on. So there's more things to do there. So that's where we landed with the storyboard. And once you have a storyboard, the next step is, okay, you can go and prototype. Since we're a smaller group anyway, anyone done some prototyping in the room? Any experience of trying it out? What has been your experience there with prototyping?
Okay, so Yes, I've done some prototyping we did some prototypes that were not so easy to do them in a matter of minutes or hours. We did a prototype of a car where we simulated a car sharing service.
Okay, great.
And that was very sketchy. You could still see all the wires and everything. So yeah, you had to ignore that once you drove the car.
Prototypes are meant to be ugly by definition. That's what I believe in. So I think that's
yeah.
all right.
We also in a different context, what we did is we did a prototype with an app, and so we printed out it was like a 12-step process. So we printed out the single steps on paper cards, and then just basically showed them to the interviewees and say, okay, now this is, if you would push this button right here, then this screen would appear.
Okay,
so we showed them the next card and asked them how they liked it, where they would push next, and
very nice.
Yeah,
that sounds like you did some paper prototyping there to sort of simulate the app, or did you do it on an app, a platform like Marvel app or something?
Well, no, it was real world interviews, and it was like an in between. So the quality, it was not wireframes. It was already production quality, let's say.
Wow. Okay.
In terms of the design of the screens.
Okay.
Yeah. Nevertheless, it was in a physical world. You could have done it in Marvel, sure, but yeah, we went with that.
I mean, depends on the project also, right? So sometimes you have the requirement for a hi-fi prototype. Sometimes lo-fi is more acceptable. Depends on the context. Any other stories there? Anyone else? Julia, Maya, have you done some prototyping, or maybe something that you did was prototyping and you didn't realize it also?
Yeah, I've done a lot of prototyping already, mainly for digital applications.
Okay.
So, and also on all kind of like low to high fidelity. So paper prototyping, then mock-ups, doing mock-ups. I use Balsamiq for that, for example. But then also higher fidelity things like Adobe. We have like Adobe clickable prototypes where actually the consumer thought it's actually a working, it was a platform, but it didn't really work, but they thought it. Yeah, mostly like that. I have not done a lot of physical prototypes, I have to say.
Very interesting. No, I think, yeah, then it's pretty much clear. The mindset is about, recreate or faking or creating like the first version of the solution that you want to build to get some valuable feedback so that you can learn from it. And it should appear real. It should give that experience, but it doesn't really have to be real. So let's say if it's an application, you don't really have to code it. You don't have to have the technology behind it. It's enough if you simulate it. So that's one of the key mindsets in prototyping. And here I thought it might be interesting today to look at how do we prototype some business ideas. So just wanted to quickly go over to another Miro that I'm using here. So, I mean, we know that most ideas usually fail. And here you see most companies even maintain their own cemeteries. So Google has a Google cemetery of ideas. They're very much software first. They don't hesitate to try things out directly with their users. So Microsoft also has a morgue of ideas that didn't really work. And Amazon is also very popular for being very experiment friendly and trying prototyping a lot of the different things. They even recently had an offer where they put up a few products and said that you can pre-order it. So depending on the number of pre-orders, we'll make it. So they're at this level with the platform where they can actually play around with stuff like that. So this is very interesting in terms of business ideas. The question is, again, without really investing too much energy or money, or without creating too much code, what usually happens in the process is that people get away with just opinions. So even in the sprint process, you can make a prototype, you can invite people to test it, to try it out, or you can just invite them to just give you feedback. So the giving feedback part has become way too easy. And there is a clear disconnect between just giving feedback and really acting it and going and doing something about it. So for example, yeah, sorry, is that a question?
No.
Okay. So most people would say they would like to see healthier options, right? But how many of them actually choose it? So you see there's a nice disconnect already here. When so many people say 57% say they would like to see healthier options, but the number of people who choose it are really less. So what I realize is that it kind of boils down to validating or testing the assumptions that you have. And the form that it takes is a prototype. So like you can also prototype a contract, or you can, one of your prototype can even be maybe a form that someone is trying out to fill, or your prototype could be a fake landing page. So there are many different forms to it. But at the end of the day, what do you want to do with it? You want it to be throwaway, you want it to be ugly, you want to really present a close to real experience maybe to the user so that they understand that, hey, this could be something. And you want to test your assumption and you learn from it. So this is the second point I find super interesting is that how do you prioritize and identify these critical unknowns that'll ensure that you kill your idea? So the prototype is not about, it can lead to it. So you can refine your prototype and it can become, something of a product or a service or campaign or whatever that you're building. But it's also very important to know what's the right time to kill your idea. So the prototype also helps you answer that question. And of course, the validation that it provides. This validation is provided at different aspects, for example, in a business idea. So for example, in a business idea, you have the problem that someone is trying to solve. Then you have the solution. What is the solution to this problem? So you might want to first go validate the problem. Is it really a problem? Is it a problem worth solving? This can be prototyped. And then you can move on to the solution to say, hey, is this a solution? Is it worth it? Is it worth prototyping? And is it worth testing? So then you can go and also check, see, does it fit the market? So you can go and check for product market fit. So maybe one example here I have of a case study that this is like a fake checkout that this company did. So they went and first did some keyword research. It's a brand for a bone broth. Okay, so this is done by boiling bone marrow, and it's like health food. So they wanted to test if this was something that would fly. So initially they first did keyword search to understand how is this term performing and to see the trends around that. Then they created like a landing page and also made sure that there was a checkout process. So there was a PayPal checkout that was created. They also had, this was the interesting part, at least for me, that I found, that they also had an apology mail, which was very clearly made, saying that, okay, people, you ordered this, but this is a test or a prototype. We don't have it at stock. But they do it in a very subtle way. So he gives them a refund or a discount and says, okay, since you're really interested, I'll actually ship it later. So again, there are multiple ways of doing this. You can just stop at this point to say, see how many people are clicking and decide that this is something that might work and not even ship, and maybe just tell your potential customers that, hey, not in stock. And this was a slightly more smarter way of doing that, saying, hey, thanks for making that sale. We'll get back to you, or we'll give you a discount, which is interesting. And they also used ads, a couple of ads, and to see some really nice results there. They had so many number of visitors, conversions, and a nice 30% conversion rates. And now they've rebranded to Kettle and Fire, and it's become a proper company, a proper brand. So this is one potential example of prototyping, say, a business idea. Any questions at this point, or any thoughts? No. Okay. Cool. Then maybe we can also look at a quick selection or a menu of things, or a menu of different prototypes, like both Philip and Julia, you also spoke about paper prototypes, mock-ups, etc. So here, this is a canvas that one of my partners created. They're called Lean Apps. And this is their canvas of all possible experiments that can be done to validate different things. So either validating the problem, they have a certain specific set of ideas, validating solutions, again, some specific ideas, and a product market fit prototyping ideas. So let's dig a little bit deeper. So some of them, you can have a customer interview or a survey. So these are more like talking to people. The customer interviews are really one-on-one interviews, and you can ask them different questions, and you can understand if the problem is really big enough. Similarly, the survey is something that you can ask people and see what results that you get, or a physical brochure, see what actions people do after that. Maybe you provide a QR code. This is something you must have seen a lot, a tear-off flyer, sticking it somewhere and seeing how many messages that you get. For an email campaign, how many people read the email, how many clicked on the link, how many signed up. A landing page, very simple. Or organic traffic, where you're posting on these forums where people are talking about this topic. Or keyword search or ads. This is also something that we saw just now in the example. And moving on to validating solutions. Of course, you have the paper prototype where you're sketching the solution and showing users that this is what the product interaction might look like. And or a click dummy. So this is where you can use Sketch, Figma, InVision, Marvel app. There are tons of tools now to create your click dummies. And you can give the same experience, but without any code behind it. There's also a simple marketing video that you can do, an explainer video, so you can see how people respond to that, or even ask them specific questions. Or a concierge test is more about solving this problem in a very manual way. Let's say, even if there is technology involved. Like, for example, we did this prototype for a company that was testing gesture-based Bluetooth headphones. So they didn't have the technology yet, but we did a test where participants could do certain gestures, like do this to move to the next track, or stop if they did this gesture, or increase volume, decrease volume, stuff like that. But we just had a person hiding behind a desk looking and changing the audio or the music accordingly, and people still got that same experience. So this is a great way to understand, if how do people react to this? Is it really helping them? And if it really makes a difference, then you can go and build it. 3D modeling, 3D printing, of course. This is a very popular one too. So instead of making it at scale, you can make a very small model and see how people respond to that. They can give you feedback on the hardware, on the design, on the usage of it. And the Wizard of Oz test is another very popular test, which is where, again, it's very similar to the concierge test, but here you also see what more you can get out of that. So you can use it both for digital as well as physical products. And you can ask, so you can look at the questions that they ask and take them through an ordering process. You can do all sorts of stuff here. So those were some of the examples in product and solution, on problem and solution fits. You can also have a product market fit prototyping test with a fake checkout or a dry wallet, and see if people pre-order. This is what the bone broth guys did, for example. Or you can give them a chance to pre-book, like what Amazon did, pre-book this, and if we reach a certain number, we'll go and do that. Purchase order, yeah, you can also get a real order and see if people are actually ready to do that without having to go through the entire process, or sometimes even go through that process and see how they respond. Mm-hmm. Crowdfunding can also be a good example where you're putting it out, and a lot of people I know use this for physical products where they measure how it performs on Kickstarter, and that gives them a very good feel for, okay, how do people really respond to this product? So that was like a nice summary of different tests or experiments, or call them what you want, prototyping tests that you can do to really test out a few business ideas, and again, categorized in these three segments. Any questions or thoughts at this point? Maybe question to you, Maya. What sort of prototyping scenarios would you have in your work?
Oh, that's probably the checkout will always work. Because when you have a product and you have a landing page, so landing page and checkout pretty much goes hand by hand, I would say.
Yeah.
And the others, I don't know, maybe we can try all and see which ones work and which ones don't. I don't think they really have a limit.
Yeah, true. But maybe was there a scenario or a situation where you didn't know how to prototype, or you were wondering, what's a possible way of testing it before actually building the whole thing?
Yeah, we are building pretty much right now at the moment an ad on like Instagram and Facebook, and thinking about building like ads as well on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So maybe that will be a way to prototype them first.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But like for the example of like building an ad, which prototype solution would you recommend?
So what are you trying to validate there? Is it a problem that you're testing out, or is it are you trying to solve a problem with that, or are you just validating a solution?
Just validating the solution, probably.
It's more the solution. Okay.
So you want to know which variant of the ad would work best? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So ads themselves are, tests in a way. So
I know, that's what I'm thinking. If it's like, or is it making sense to prototype the ad, or just try it out and see which ad works best?
No, then I would ask, what do you want to achieve with the ad? What is the expected outcome that you're looking to get?
Get more sales. Easy.
So is that more, again, in sales, is it more conversions, or is it just more people to just follow? Which part of the sales process?
More conversions, yes. More
conversions, okay. Well, without ads, then you have to have a very strong call to action, or and I see that, at least from my limited experience with sales. I mean, I'm not a sales expert or anything, but here I see live interaction that always gets you more trust. So I mean, depending on the value of the product also and the amount of the sale that you're asking people to make, if there's already a lot of trust, then it's easy for people to see that value. And if they click on the ad and if they see, different things, that's an easy win. But if you're in a very early stage, you're still building something, then you can look at, giving people a lot of value through the different things that you're doing as a replacement for an ad.
Yeah. Okay.
So that could be an article, that could be downloadable, that could be a test that they take, they get some results. So anything that increases the trust value is what, at least from my experience, I can say.
Yeah, we actually created a downloadable, so I think
the question to ask there would be then, at which point do you start using ads, right? So before using ads, maybe you can try certain things with the downloadable, and if that doesn't perform, then you can maybe make this decision to go to ads.
Yeah, good idea.
But how would you, I mean, in a case where you have different ads, let's say different copy texts, and you're not sure which one to take, how would you decide, like ABC? Would you just spend a few bucks and do like an A/B test and see which one performs better, and so on and so on, or is there a good method on this canvas?
So for ads, to be very specific, not really. You can do like A/B testing and figure out, what's a better ad, or you can see. It also depends on the product or the service, because sometimes the copy really matters a lot, or sometimes it's more about just getting people to that CTA, or the ad itself is a CTA. So what's the product or what's the service here that we're talking about that you feel like testing? Or the ads, what are the ads for?
Was a question to me or to Philip, because he was asking?
I think it was to Philip. Yeah.
Oh no! It's to Maya, because I don't have any ads running at the moment.
Okay. Then my bad. Yeah. Okay.
So we have like a coaching product, I would say, that's like a hybrid form. Yeah, because some are online, and then you have live coaching as well. So it's like a combination product. So what was the question?
Yeah. So the question was still, which would you do A/B tests, etc. Is there a certain format that would be best to test out?
Maybe the combination of these two, something like this, where you're looking at some keywords for coaching or online coaching, and see, where exactly it's, or what kind of keywords people are looking for, and use that maybe in some ads to understand if you can get some clicks on that.
I think it's like really trying out, isn't it? Because like sometimes it's just the way you use the same words, but in a different order. Sometimes it's join the webinar now, and sometimes it's the webinar is on now, or it's really.
It can also be tailored to the prospect or customer depending on where they are in the sales cycle also.
True, yeah.
So you can even have an ad for a completely new person who has no idea, and that could be different. The copy could be different, or the CTA could be different compared to someone who's probably been following you and has maybe commented on your posts or liked something, and now is in a different stage. So I'm sure there are mechanisms to do that too.
So I can quickly maybe tell you from my experience, because the online ad thing, I've done it on one of my projects.
Oh, nice.
and what we did first, so we did an A/B test, like Philip said. So we had, I think, even 3 different wording and pictures.
Okay.
And then actually maybe just for a day, we checked what works better. And then we used the best one.
Okay.
And then we let it run for another like 3 to 5 days to see what the conversion rate are. So actually we like, it was a 2-phased step.
Okay.
And then we took the conversion rates from the best performing ad and checked how many actually ended up, on the website, how many sign up and like that.
But did you get enough information within 1 day?
I think to be honest, I don't know anymore how long it was running, but overall the Facebook one, it was only live for 5 days. And I think one was the A/B test. Yeah. Well, what the data you get is not, it's just an indication, and also whether that actually indicates that people want your product is also another question. But I wouldn't do the Facebook test longer than 5 days, because otherwise just spending a lot of money. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But did you also do some testing with, say, extreme users or something like that? Or was it just more run it on a particular channel and see what?
No, I mean, it was targeted. So that's why Facebook is good, because Facebook.
Yeah, you can target the demographic.
Yeah, you can target it, and then you can actually see whether, if it is more attractive for a specific target group.
Got it.
No extreme users, but targeted Facebook advertising with the A/B test at the beginning.
Yeah.
But you have to iterate. So Maya, you have to let it run, see what happens, and then after 1 day you can adjust. I think that works.
Yeah.
And if no one clicks on it, then you need also to change the targeting maybe.
Obviously, yeah. Thanks.
Nice. Any other formats that some of you have used before here, or what is your prototyping process, or anything that you feel is really important to keep in mind while prototyping?
So we used Opinio as well. That's like an app where you can just post simple questions, and you get results like super quickly. So we usually do polls of around 200 people, and you get the results back in 24 hours.
Nice.
It's good for saying maybe comparing two solutions, or it's like a market research. So you can ask people simple questions of, have you ever thought of what would you think about if your bank would offer you this and that? And then,
okay.
I don't know, so 30% say sounds cool, and 70% say I wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
The only problem with Opinio is that the users get, I think, 8 cents per question. So the people that answer these questions are not representing the whole society of Germany. Yeah, it's rather the lower end. So if you have like a super sophisticated product or customer base, then you will not get representative answers from this channel.
That's true. Yeah. But how do you use that data ahead? What does it go into? The results of this poll?
It goes into it's basically, let's say you have a topic in mind, AI, big data, I don't know, and you want to see if there's a relevant market in Germany already. Sometimes a topic is still too early.
True.
Maybe we can put it like that, and then you can check if there's already customer interest for this topic.
Okay.
At least that's what we used it for.
Okay, wonderful. That's a really interesting one. I haven't heard of that till now. I mean, there was a similar site where people give you answers and they do a lot of stuff, but not this one.
Yeah, there's a similar one that's called Applause, I think.
Okay.
Where when you already have a finished product, let's say a finished checked out process, but you want to improve it,
Mhm.
then they will send users to this
Okay.
web page, checkout process, whatever you have,
Okay.
and they will try out your shop and look for bugs, and
Okay.
they'll send you a report
Mhm.
of all the bugs and all the errors and all the I don't know, optimal aspects they could find.
Yeah.
And they're also super quick. So within 24 hours, 48 hours, you get this report.
Wow.
And if you work with a Scrum team, you
Mhm.
know, they can take this report, and in the next sprint they can iterate on all the
Wow.
findings.
That is pretty quick. That's cool. Yeah. And could you please share the links to these tools in the chat, maybe, Philip, if you know, or just the names, so
Yeah, sure.
for all of us.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
I think one more thing that is really important, because I've done like one side project, kind of like a uni project, where we did like a little hackathon sort of. And we were prototyping as well and used Figma to build a click dummy.
Yeah.
When you test it, I mean, you and your team will test it obviously, but also when you ask people, they should be part of your target audience or the target customer, because we also asked other people that wouldn't even use the product, and they tested it, and then they gave us feedback that wasn't really relevant for us. So I think focusing on the target user is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I also feel, this sort of tension comes in between opinions and behavior. So how can you be sure that you really find people who are more closer to behavior than just opinions? This is still a very tricky thing to do. Thanks, man. And any other experiences maybe in the B2B context? Because B2C is always like you have all these different ways of testing, but B2B is much more closed as a system. They find it much more difficult to test things, say, in large companies, because there's a lot of layers and people saying, oh, we can't share this idea outside.
So what we did in the bank is that we asked two customers of ours if we could, if they would be willing to visit a portal that we designed and built, and if they could give us feedback.
Okay, cool.
If you have a good relationship with your customers, then yeah, you can do that. In this case, it was actually a customer that requested this portal. They requested the feature, and they were getting a little bit on our nerves. So when we build it, to also calm them down a little bit, we said, okay, now we're building it. Since you want it so bad, why don't you check out what we did so far? And they were happy to do that. So
nice. So I think it's, yeah, you're right. A lot goes into the relationship, also how secure people feel. Then they might be a bit more open to try different things. But with corporate innovation, what I've seen is there's already all these internal layers that create hurdles. So if you're an entrepreneur, you need to know how to negotiate on the one side and jump these hurdles internally. Because then sales will say, no, you can't meet the person, or legal will say you can't do this. So it's just about, whereas compared to an open entrepreneur, you can just go and make that decision if you're not within an organization. So yeah, that's also very interesting. Cool. So
One more experience.
yeah, sure.
I think if you are a startup, you can do that one. Not if you're an established company. Actually, just pretend that you can deliver the product. I've been writing for startups like even some official offers with price tags, even if I knew we would not be able to deliver this product in a certain time. So, and then you see whether they take it or not, and always pretend that you can do it. And only if they buy or say, hey, yeah, we want to really do it, then you can, oh yeah, okay, maybe we need more time. But I think that's a good way to do it. But if you establish companies, it's harder because you might lose your reputation, right? As a starter, you can say, okay, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Half a year more.
Don't really care. That's true. That's true. No, that's why with a larger company, you just need to maybe go off brand, maybe where you're not using the same brand and you still make that test somehow happen. Yeah, I think it's you just get to be more creative or you're forced to be.
By the way, can you share that overview that you showed us? Is there something you can share, or is it?
Yeah, I can share. Let me find a link to that. I think I don't have a direct link.
Or just a screenshot, because I think it's very interesting, to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can also share the document itself. It's just that I don't have the direct link yet. Yeah, go for it if you feel like. I can anyway share the original later.
Yeah, I think you can just share the browser link and we can have access to it as well. I think it's the easiest way.
No, this is something that, so I work with Lean Apps where they do a lot of innovation strategy work. We partner there together, as well as they do a lot of development work too. So all my post sprint work, if there are digital products, they do that. They have developer teams, and that's where it works very well with them. And they really came up with this interesting idea of having a menu of things. So looking at, what are the things you can possibly do, and to go even beyond that, there's another menu that that they were using. No, this was the one. Yeah, I remember seeing a second one, but this more or less covers most of the options. Cool. Let me see how I can share that. But at this point, let's go back here. So that's more or less prototyping in a nutshell. What comes next is, of course, testing. We'll look at that in a deeper sense in the next session. And we'll also do a quick simulation of how to test and how to record, say, testing results. And what are some nice ways of putting it all together. So there's already this template that does a decent job. And we can also look at all possible post-sprint activities that need to be done, because a lot of things actually start once a sprint ends. So you can either go back and iterate on it and do an iteration sprint, improve whatever came out of this, or you can actually go back to your collection of ideas in the beginning that you identified, kill this particular idea if it didn't work, and pull another one, use another problem statement, and see if you want to sprint on that. But even apart from that, there are a couple of other things, like how do you manage it in a different organizational context. There's quite a lot of interesting post-sprint stuff that comes up, and we'll look into that next week. Meanwhile, we're just waiting to hear from Andre here. He's going to join us today as the prototyping expert. Yeah. But while we are still waiting, any other questions or any other topics that you might want to look into?
I have a question, Rakesh. So in a classic sprint,
Mhm.
how much prototyping do you do? Because you have a limited time frame, right?
Yeah.
And so what do you usually do if you, let's say, do a typical sprint for a company?
In the classic in-person, is it? Or is it, what is the context? Are we doing it in person? Are we doing it remotely?
Well, doesn't matter. I'm just wondering because, well, you can't do so much prototyping in that rigid design sprint phase, or maybe you have found your own way to do it. I'm just.
So my way depends on how much or what the urgency is, number one. So what are they looking to do? What is the urgency, or what are the capabilities? These are the two things that I look at for the client. And what do they want to learn from the sprint? So some clients actually say, hey, we want to go through that process because we want to try prototyping. We haven't done it before, so we want to really experience it. And we're ready to take the time to do that. So in that case, we actually sit and go through that whole process, like take the time for it. If it's 2 or 3 sessions of remote work, that's what it is. Or if it is a whole day of prototyping in an in-person workshop, that's what it is. But then if there are clients who say, look, we're just worried about the results. I don't really care what happens in between. Then I'm usually bringing them to this point of the storyboard, and saying, look, this is the storyboard. This is what we're going to convert into a prototype. I need your okay from the decider for the storyboard. And then we just build it and test it, always syncing with the client to share, look, this is the prototype. These are the tests that are happening, being collaborative there, and finally presenting the results back. So depending on who they are, what they want, I sometimes absorb the prototyping and testing. If not, we do it together.
And do you go in iterations? Like, do you make a prototype test, or do you say, hey, like one day we make a lot of prototypes, or one prototype, and then one day we just test? How do you do it?
See, it again depends on the problem. So that's why I keep this aspect a little bit fluid, the prototyping and the testing part. So if you have a designer on the team, or if I bring in, say, a designer, then things become a lot more easier, right? So you can get to the screens very quickly. It's also about how detailed the client wants to be about this. So do they really want to be sure that the whole flow that's made in the prototype is really spot on? Then it's not going to happen in 1 or 2 sessions. That's going to take a week, literally, because you need to keep going back. Sometimes the client doesn't know if this is the right screen, if this is the next step. They have to go check back with their team and say, okay, can we do this? Can we not do this? It's a very extended process then. If they know everything and they say, okay, let's go try things out, let's go test. We want to see the results of the sprint. Then we do like 1 to 3 iterations on the prototype. So we do a first pass at from the storyboard, we do a first pass, try to see if that's enough. And then do another pass or 2 just to make sure that we reach the right kind of fidelity. And then we go into testing. So are you looking to understand the exact number of hours it takes?
No, I just wanted to understand how you do it in practice. Yeah, because I said I'm always using design thinking, and that's more iterative. So that's why for me, the design sprint sounds like, one day just prototyping, one day just testing. And I just wanted to know whether it actually works like that, because I read the book, right? From
no, it still does work.
Like
that's why
just
I'm saying
prototyping, just testing, and no.
Yeah, that works if the whole team is on board, right? So I'll do like a whole session of prototyping. If we can do an afternoon remotely, usually if the whole team is committed and they say, okay, everyone's going to help out, then you assign roles to everyone, and that becomes super easy. So That works. Similarly for testing. So you say, who wants to take up the testing role, the tester's role, who wants to become the note taker? Then you already recruit users even before you come to the prototyping phase. So I would already be recruiting users even in the first day in the understand phase, or even before that in the problem framing phase. So we'll recruit users there, and then testing happens relatively quickly there. My feeling is that with the sprint, you just need to organize things a little bit more. You need to be better at planning. Then you fit into those phases much better.
Okay, I'll have to get off this call at this moment, sadly,
No
but
worries.
I have to say thank you very much, Rakesh,
Okay.
for your time and effort, and yeah, really appreciate the initiative, and yeah, thanks for enlightening me.
Thanks for joining, Philip. It was very nice. Very cool to have this interaction. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, 3 more minutes for Andre. Let me quickly check where he is. Yeah, he's joining in a minute. And maybe one more interesting question would be, in what context would you run a sprint, Maya? Is there, or have you tried doing some of that in your team?
No, I haven't tried it yet. And I'm actually not quite sure when we would try it, but it's just interesting to see, because you probably know Celine Flores-Villa.
Yeah. I
Yep.
know. Yeah,
And
you're
I'm on her
team. Okay.
I'm on her team, so
Very nice.
so I'm not quite sure when we're going to try it. It's just really interesting to get like all the information, and maybe one day we will do it.
Oh, very nice. No, I was even thinking of talking about trying out a communications campaign sprint. So that would be super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we can talk about that. It's,
Sure. Yeah.
Andre is here. Hey, Andre, can you hear us?
I think he's still connecting.
Okay. No, because I realized there was quite a few communication challenges that you and your team are working on, right? And that might be super interesting there to see if we can use the sprint format for that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you're creating, assets through prototyping and testing at the end of the day. So, going through the whole process might make it even more cooler.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm in for it.
So maybe I'll just stop sharing for a bit. Hello, hey.
Hey, Rakesh.
Hey, Andre, nice to have you. How's it going?
Thanks for the invite. Yeah, good. It's been a while.
Anytime. Yeah, it's been a while.
How are you?
Good, doing good. Back in Berlin, so.
Nice. Yeah. Cool.
Great. So we just finished a sort of quick overview of the prototyping phase in the sprint, and we also went over like a very quick overview of how to prototype business ideas. and what are all possible ways, like how do you prototype maybe and validate the problem phase? How do you validate the solution, or even prototyping ideas for the product market fit? So that's more or less what we covered. So we were just looking at all these parts in general. So over to you. I think you're the best person to introduce yourself and DeepWorks Studio. Hand over the invisible mic.
Nice, thank you. Hello, I'm Andre. It's very nice to meet you. Thanks a lot for the invite here. So I guess as probably the quickest and easiest intro, I used to, sorry, I just had some food. I used to work at AJ and Smart about 6 years ago when I was like basically part of the formation of it, and then worked there for about 3.5 years alongside with everybody and kind of co-evolved the sprint process as it got popularized by them now. And then early 2018, I left and started working mostly, or like started trying to play around how to do all of this remotely, and now run DeepWorks Studio, which is kind of a design studio based on similar principles, similar process. Nice cat. And
Hi.
And I'm currently building it out to be a decentralized organization, which means that the goal is for me to set it up in a way that no centralized authority is required to make any decisions that lead the organization, and that the workers can get connected, or like designers can get connected to the projects as quickly as possible. But also the revenue is distributed equally across all participants, and not just, you know, to the leadership, which is not going to exist simply.
Nice. So you're really building the digital collective there, and this is something that a lot of people struggle to do. So cool stuff there.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting approaches, and the space is very like currently developing. I think if you've noticed the NFT craze in Bitcoin, or sorry, in blockchain a couple of months ago, or I think it was like a month or two ago, there will be phases of applications that can be run on blockchain, and decentralized organizations are one of those, but they will probably only appear, I don't know, earliest late this year. Nice.
Wow, very cool. And where would you say you are in that phase of building?
It's quite an interesting question, because I can see a way to bridge this over to the topic of today, because it's actually kind of a prototype. So cool. The organization is running, and it is more or less decentralized at the moment. But it feels decentralized to the workers. So the infrastructure is kind of built up in a way that kind of accommodates everybody's decisions and pays actually kind of the revenue out to people, but it's all in a manual way. We don't use actual cryptocurrencies yet, simply because it's a lot more legal stress.
True.
But also in a prototyping phase, it lets us explore different possibilities and fix problems before we actually build everything on chain and write expensive smart contracts.
Very cool, really cool. So
how many people are working for DeepWorks Studio? So how many are you?
So I would say that we have a network of about 20 people, individuals who are experts. Okay, maybe not 20, maybe like 15. And they're all freelancers, which is part of the concept. So the organization is just kind of an infrastructure to connect freelancers to projects. And there is no HR department. There is a way how people get kind of attested or receive a skill badge for working on a project, where they become part of the vetted community by actually working on projects. So regardless of your skill set, you can always apply to participate on a project. And if an expert decides that you're a good fit and they want to, you know, teach you, or you're already at a high level, and it means that they will work less because you can share tasks well. Then it doesn't require any intermediary. So you just apply, and then the expert selects you, and you start working right away and get paid for the work that you do.
Very cool.
Yeah, so can talk about this for a long time. This is also a prototype right now, so I'm actually testing that same system, this kind of hiring system or like skill attestation system with a few other organizations. And I don't exactly know the context of what you guys are building right now or like what you're working on. I think there's a lot of value in using no-code tools or like off-chain tools like Typeform, Zapier, Discord, that you can connect and just prototype any structure for an organization and see how that could look.
That's amazing. I think this is like a really good example of an organizational prototype that you're trying out. And for a lot of people, that can be very abstract to imagine in the first place. So it's very cool that you're able to break it down and say, okay, this is what it could look like.
Yeah, and I personally just did it live, almost like, so like as the people are in there.
Okay.
And like obviously there's a lot of problems popping up and you need to fix them.
Yeah.
But it was fine. It was kind of worth the compromise because nobody else did it so far. But now we're actually testing them in, and I really like the ideas. So that's, I think, worth kind of sharing in this conversation. A lot of projects have sandbox communities, which are essentially Discord channels where they have, I don't know, a small subset of their community just hang out and be interested in new ways to experiment with community building.
Okay.
And they basically just use Discord and bots and just like, they're there, they're actually humans. And the teams prototype ideas on what could be the next thing that could be implemented in the main community.
Okay, so you have like recursive prototyping happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it works really well. Like that's how we're testing these things on other platforms. And seeing like if something fails, it's good if it's only affecting 10 people before you actually implement it in a community with 3,000. Yeah.
And how do people, I mean, so does everyone need to be then a member of the community, or do you have special permissions for people who can just plug in and plug out?
For us, you basically just sign an agreement that you're not going to do anything stupid on camera. That's pretty much it.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, we learn from our mistakes, you know.
Learn from Elon Musk.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a few people who just like joined projects and then they were like starting to eat and smoke in front of clients, and we're like, maybe like turn your camera off real quick. And yeah, it's kind of a legal document. It's just a basic thing, but that's the only requirement to really get started working. Yeah.
No, then again, going back to the topic of prototyping, we've been looking at it in very general and also within the context of a sprint. I think Julia had a very good question of, okay, when you're prototyping in the sprint process, you know, how exact can it be, and you know, and do you really get things done within that phase, within that time frame? Maybe you can share something from your experience there.
Yeah, definitely. It's really different and depends on the project, I would say. And I have to also kind of introduce this with a caveat, because deep work is built to maximize the quality of the output. So the way it's structured is that it basically only works, the organization only works if everybody's actually doing their best work.
Okay.
And the standard is being updated frequently based on the combination of the market demand and the experts who come in and improve the internal process themselves. And so naturally, the quality of the prototypes that we produce is becoming relatively high, and actually quite unbelievably high for the amount of time that goes into it. That said, the whole process, we also open source, so it's completely like openly readable and applicable. But to answer the question, it's really, it depends on the project. So I think I usually see it as like if you see prototyping as a mental process, then you always want to make the adjust the fidelity to the actual purpose of the test. So what are the things that you start with? What are the things that you want to try out and learn? What's the kind of scientific research that you want to do, and what do you need for that? So if you're prototyping, like back in AJ and Smart, we were doing experiments with things like VR prototypes or with like service design. And some of these prototypes were basically just like a little, like a theater play where we would just handhold a person through the airport and kind of pretend that we were going through certain check-ins. And that was a prototype because that was like the answer to the question of what they would respond to within the flow that we have set up before. And for like VR prototypes, we sometimes had to just show like, here, this is the device, how it approximately would look. And like, here's a 3D environment. And like, because we wanted to, basically the question was just whether people would be freaked out by it or not. And then the content was actually secondary. So they weren't freaked out, which is a good sign. So we actually put more resources into it and developed a nice app that looked nice. I think for the most part, and what Deepwork is doing, and I can just show you like, or maybe even share it with you, this link, because
yeah, sure.
I
mean, if you want to share something on screen,
cool.
Just made you co-host.
Sure, cool. Yeah, I'll just do it real quick. So we have our website, and on the website we actually put up pretty much all the projects that we work on as like all the design files. So the advantage of working in crypto or like in a blockchain space is that there are no NDAs and everything is open source. And so we kind of work with teams that, like we basically force them to not have any NDAs at all. So all of the work that we do with them, we can just publish online. And you can, like, I'm just going to put this into chat because you might want to use some of these. And I actually encourage people to just steal some ideas from this prototype. The visuals, you can just go in and like, click on try the prototype, but you also have all the files here. But that's essentially kind of the fidelity of the prototypes. So they're not like super high end, but they do look real. So they do look like a product that you would want to use because
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, the intention with the user tests for the most part is to find out whether people will be likely to use that and see value in it. And they don't necessarily pay attention to the visual design because it looks real. So they really try to understand if what they're doing here is actually useful for them personally. So that's I would say is kind of the fidelity on average.
So there's like a baseline fidelity that you've sort of always had, or that's something that you've built over time. And that sort of, that sounds like a very platform kind of approach then. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But also, again, like sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't say that we actually did have like one project where we just user tested wireframes, but that was kind of an accident because the team, we only did the user testing, and it was like an experiment for like, what if we don't do the whole sprint thing, but only the user test. And they basically overpromised, and they were like, yeah, we have a functional prototype. And they were like, here's the lucid chart. I'm like, what? That doesn't sound like a prototype. So we had to actually like put a lot together ourselves.
Okay, well.
But
and
yeah.
Do you also do things other than digital, or are you more restricted now just to digital?
Well, currently not. I would say that I just do projects for fun that would be non-digital, I guess. So let me think. I was making a mushroom coffee myself. So like mixing different ingredients and like a little bit of magic mushrooms. It's not legal, so I can't really like sell it. But I was able to go through kind of, all the process that's required. So I would source the ingredients. I would figure out how much they are. I could put together like a business plan and like how much everything would cost in manufacturing. I had these like, and these are great. Like if you have the chance, or if, like we should still hang out at some point. Maybe like next week because I'm currently in Frankfurt. But
Sure.
I'll bring you some. And it's essentially just like a kind of a tea bag format, but it's a coffee. So it's like a coffee, like a portable coffee filter with the mixture in it. So you just take it, like
Hot water.
Yeah, you tear it open,
Ready
you
to
put
go.
it on the cup, hot water, and then you let it sit for 10 minutes.
Awesome.
And then half an hour later, you feel like a rocket.
That's the best prototype ever I've heard.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing was kind of I just did it for fun because I was like it's a nice thing and like a nice gift.
Yeah.
But what was interesting when I started kind of giving them out, and I was like, that's kind of the first step of trying to figure out if that's a product. It's like to just give it out and see what kind of emotional response comes back. And maybe like the first version was like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. But at some point people were like, when are you going to start selling those? And it was multiple people, like different people who I've like, they don't know each other. All of them said, when are you going to sell this? Like
bling, product alert.
Yeah, and that tells you that people are willing to put more into this than just kind of an emotional response. In order to prototype it later, then if you wanted to, like in this particular case, the only way I could see was to start selling it on the dark net, and that was just not worth my effort right now, just because I have a lot of other shit to do. But that would be kind of the next phase, to just try and actually sell it somehow.
True, yeah. No, that would be really like, I mean, that's when you get into the economics of it.
Correct.
And move beyond. So this is always a dance that I observe. It's very, very interesting because you're looking at people's willingness or what they're saying, and then on the other end of the spectrum is the actual behavior. Right. So how do you keep moving between the two, or you really want more credible data, right? And your more credible data comes more from behavior rather than just
exactly
open statements that look, you need to start selling it. I'm like, okay, what if you sell based on that tomorrow? Nobody buys.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And people do say a lot of like dumb stuff that is just like they think that's real, but if you really put it on the market, it's like, that's not going to sell. All right. That's the data.
This also goes back to how irrational we are as humans.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But if you try it out with like physical stuff, not like digital, it must be, it's kind of like a low cost project, right? Because when you have like physical, I don't know, whatever, and like to produce a few of your items, it costs you maybe, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars. It's not going to work so easily if you don't have like an investor or
yeah, exactly. It depends on your goal, and then it depends on really like, I think, if with very difficult or like very expensive products, there is going to be a situation where you will have to prototype it in some way, and that will have to be like, that's a restriction for like who you are as well. Like if you're not able to afford that, well, it's probably gonna not work for you, and someone else is gonna do it, which is fine. But in these cases, I think it's worth that if you believe in something so much that you would, spend a lot of money on it, which you might not have at that point. I would try and find people who are able to do that too, and just kind of join up with them. And, in the end, you're just like trying to make your vision happen, regardless of whose name is on it. Like, it's not about who's doing it. It's about the fact that it gets done.
True.
And is your platform also like, if you only have an idea but don't want to prototype it, just put it on your platform and someone else is going to prototype it, or how does your platform work?
Do you mean our like community, or do you mean like any projects that are like outside of the client projects? Yeah,
just like if like a random person just has a cool idea but has like either no like capability or even the knowledge to prototype it. Just like this idea on there.
We do community projects where someone sometimes at least we try to I'm working on making it a bit more of a habit now, but essentially everybody from the community can suggest an idea that they would like to work on. And we actually had one recently where someone was like, hey, it would be cool to create a website that tracks, like, somehow, actually they weren't really sure about what it's supposed to be, but it was basically something with like, how do we connect the problems of climate change with the like incredibly high fees on Ethereum or like on a Bitcoin networks, because essentially like these networks really tax the entire environment in some way. Although, yeah, there's a couple of caveats. But so one person was like, hey, I want to work on something like this. And they suggested that. And then relatively quickly, a team formed of people who were like also interested in that. And then if something like that forms, we basically give them about €1,000 in total to just like go through the process.
Okay.
And like we just kind of divide that funding across all of the participants regarding in relation to how much work they've done, or like how they contribute with it. But because you then end up having a bunch of people who do different stuff, and because there is documentation on how to do a lot of the work, prototypes normally get done. And even if they're not like perfect, it's still people just kind of trying out what they can do, and then just kind of go through the process and just have something at least that's tangible, that moves beyond the step of just being an idea, but becomes something that actually other people are also able to understand. And then like for this projects with the climate change, that ended up a prototype, and then someone found a similar project, and so they got in touch with each other. And now there's a conversation between these two, because we design an interface, they got the technology, so now they're like trying to figure out where this can go. And yeah, so I guess that'll be the process for these kinds of ideas if the capabilities for execution are not always given.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome, because then you have so much motivation and ownership coming from people themselves, rather than being forced to do something.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, our community is not really forced to do anything, and I don't want to kind of create a place where that's the thing. I mean, that said, also it's a pretty fine line to walk, because if people don't see that there is value in sticking with it, or they're not like educated enough to be like to actually deliver on promise, which most people are, like, or like at least most juniors, then a project would slack off. And I'm still trying to figure out a good way, like a non-intrusive way to motivate people to actually complete a project at a specific time.
Wow.
But it's very hard. I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of personal trust and accountability within the social network that they are creating. So,
it could also be about values, and
right.
if this person brings the right values to the community, and the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, that's exactly. So, and that's pretty tricky, because it almost requires every person to somehow communicate these values. And I visited an interesting online conference a couple of weeks ago, which had a fantastic way to mobilize a community and actually to create this like network where people understood each other's values quite well. And they were doing one-on-one sessions leading up to the conference beforehand. So they would be like calendar slot. This week we're going to do like, one-on-ones. Everybody just joins it. There's a quick intro, and then just one person meets another person from that cohort, and they just talk about something. Doesn't matter what it is.
Okay, so breakout rooms, and you just talk.
Pretty much, yeah. They used Gather, also a pretty cool tool. I'm also started using it. It's so fun.
Nice.
But yeah, and then through these conversations, that develops kind of a bond between these two individuals. And then they do that a couple of times, and these people get to know someone else every time.
True, yeah.
And that really creates like a fundamental mesh of understanding each other's values and like profiles, personalities, and strengthens the entire community. Like that was very, very impressive how well that worked to me.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's the perfect. I think that's the best replacement for in-person networking, I guess.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
you really get quality time,
Right.
and you're able to do that one-on-one. So
Yeah, and I find that it's a nice way to do like a kind of it's almost like an icebreaker, but like it's not one that's like, hey, let's play a game and like let's do these rules and stuff, and everybody's just like, why am I doing this? But it's like, okay, let's figure out what exactly an icebreaker is about. It's about getting to meet someone else. So just like do that. Good luck.
It's like speed dating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, one of these people I talked to, that was actually quite funny. He was really like, I just messaged him because there was an interest in overlap in interest, and I was like, hey, cool. So let's just jump straight in, because it was on Zoom. I'm Andre, and I'm interested in this thing, and like you wanted to talk to me about it. And then he's like, okay, let's start by sharing how we feel. And I'm like, all right, sure.
I just had my mushroom coffee. I'm good.
Yeah, that is kind of a weird thing, but I'm rolling with it. But so people are different, and it's always like it's always interesting to kind of go through these like speed dating things, because you get to know someone really quickly in a couple of minutes.
Very cool, very cool. Just to again close the loop, any other questions or thoughts you might want to share with Andre on prototyping? Now's your chance.
I would like to know, how far do you go with prototyping? Well, like, or do you do the prototyping yourself, or does the company you work with does the prototyping? And when do you leave, basically?
When do you leave the building?
the project, right? I mean, what's your job? What's the other partner doing?
Okay, interesting question. So currently, I would say I have different roles. So I'm building this all up as well, so that these roles are clearly separable. And sometimes I'm a user researcher on the project, bureaucratically, just a freelance user researcher, or like a facilitator or a product designer, depending on the project and what I want to do. I'm also kind of a creative director who's responsible for a project if other people do that work. And then obviously, like, I am kind of a leading role, like a founder, CEO, whatever, who's actually kind of building the infrastructure and working on these things. So I would clearly separate these things out. And all like most projects follow this kind of sprint structure. So there's always facilitation and workshops, then prototyping, and then user research. We kind of streamlined our process quite well so far, that the prototyping takes 3 days and 4 hours each. And there are specific tasks that get done within that time frame. And I think your question was more related to when is the fidelity high enough, and when are you over designing, right? That's kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, basically, what kind of level of fidelity do you do?
Yeah.
And do you also develop it, or when does the customer take over? But maybe you don't have that phase when they take over. I don't know your process.
Yeah, right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so we basically give them the design files in Figma, and sometimes they're asking for a component library, so it's easier for their front-end devs to just take them and implement or get the CSS. But essentially, we're only taking over the design part and only the prototyping part. So we would only create the screens, in the individual screens, and then sometimes, again, the component libraries. And that's it. It's actually not that much, but it's complicated enough. So.
And you do high fidelity.
Exactly.
Wireframing or Figma screens, things like that.
The screens that I showed earlier, or you can look up.
Yeah, because they look really good. So that's why I was wondering.
That is the deliverable quality. So that's something that gets done in either 3 days, or then we sometimes do an iteration week. So this source grid that I screen shared, that was 3 days of prototyping. but again, like we have designers in our network who are just like, that's their life. So they're doing that stuff and they deliver at a pretty high quality.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question more or less.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. It really because it really depends on what your capabilities are, or like if there's other designers who can help you.
But the coding is done by someone else, not by you.
Yes. We don't do coding yet, although I think we will have to at some point because a lot of teams are asking for it. And so far, we were working with teams who already had front-end developers. But now people are just coming in with wild ideas, a lot of funding, and like also quite a lot of technical knowledge. Like we have a project that's building a platform for options trading, and that's not something that really existed so far, especially in the crypto space. They're experts on it because they come from the traditional finance world, but they're not all of them are good developers. And so they have a lot of funding, but they need experts who can take care of it.
Very interesting. So there's like interesting knowledge gaps that get, filled when you bring these different entities together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's quite interesting because it develops in a way that I think in the future there will be quite a lot more collaboration between people, and like it will be a lot easier to focus on only your expertise without having to learn and upgrade, so that you can finally like realize what you were dreaming of. But you'll actually be able to get access to funding and experts in a much more frictionless way that is just faster. Like the platforms that allow that are being built, but it's just going to take a little while till they're accessible enough. But yeah, it's tricky. Like how I see it is really like people are just coming together from different places, work on something, develop it, put it out, and then either a community gathers around it and it becomes an organic product, or not, and then they kind of split up again and do other things.
Awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Just being mindful of time for all of us here. So thank you, Andre. It's been really cool.
Always.
Some of the best prototyping examples we have heard till now.
Nice. Yeah, well, also check out the like case studies, and if you ever work on something, just I'm just saying, like, not because I want to show off, like the opposite. I'd really like encourage people to steal them and make them their own, because that is a creative process that's normal, but I don't think that's kind of enforced enough, or like not enforced, but like communicated enough that it's fine to steal things. It's fine to repurpose them.
Yeah, no, totally get that. I'm a big fan of that too. And it's just also like it can take, I mean, it's very common in the music world, in the music industry. That's more or less the norm, because at the end of the day, you don't have anything that's like hyper original, right? So they're all different variations of things. So
also with movies.
Yeah. I mean, they're all variations of this one big epic or something, right? The hero's journey. Something.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. There are some. Yeah. But there was this YouTube channel that was quite cool. I think it's called Everything is a Remix. I think they've closed it now. But they were doing, I think, just because they went through quite a lot and started other projects now, but they were really, really good analysts and film historians. And they were basically analyzing a lot of films and being like, look at this scene, it's been probably taken from this movie. And it was just like 1-to-1, exactly the same framing. And it's like, it's quite interesting to kind of think about the movies that way, is that the authors just kept track of notes. They like watched a lot of movies, frames and shots they liked, and then just rearranged them into a hero's journey or like any type of narrative structure they liked, like put them together and make them their own. And
that's also what happened with like a lot of Walt Disney movies, because it did, like when you watch I think The Jungle Book and Winnie Pooh, it's like exactly the same.
Oh yeah. I think that there was a reason to it also, because they had to reuse things because they were very short on budget or something.
Right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's funny because they take like they took the same animations and the same.
Yeah, and they just built around it. And
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
yeah, very smart, very smart. Perfect. On that note, thanks again. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful. Thanks for taking time on a nice Friday afternoon. So the last session is going to be next Friday. We're looking at testing and all post-sprint activities. And of course, experimentation in general. We'll have Najit from Lean Apps as the guest. And we're also putting out a newsletter. So if you're interested at any point, feel free to sign up on my website. Otherwise, enjoy.
Nice.
And see you all soon.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much, Rakesh. It was
Thanks.
great to see you.
Likewise.
Have a
See
great weekend.
you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.